We've done plenty of VS videos in the past on this channel, but I feel as though this one is a real grudge match. The Pocophone F1 vs the OnePlus 6. What makes this such an epic showdown is that, in many ways, Pocophone is positioned to steal a crown that's belonged to OnePlus for a long time. OnePlus has always been the OEM you turn to when you're looking for flagship specs at a mid-range price. Over time though, OnePlus's handsets have gradually seen a bit of price creep, to the point where they're starting to price themselves out of budget for a lot of their initial audience. Which makes space for the Pocophone F1, a device that's been getting a lot of attention recently thanks to just how much it can offer for such a low price. So the OnePlus 6 exemplifies the company's trend towards nicer but pricier devices. It's an excellent phone with a beautiful build quality, running on top-end specs thanks to a Snapdragon 845, up to 8GB of RAM, and up to 256GB of storage. It has a large 6.28-inch AMOLED display with an 83.8% screen-to-body ratio, and an excellent 1080x2280p resolution. There's a dual-lens 16-megapixel camera and a 16-megapixel selfie camera around the front, plus a 3,300 mAh battery. But it all costs $529 for the base model. Enter the Pocophone F1. Despite the really weird name, this is a device that boasts the same key specs, the Snapdragon 845, up to 8GB of RAM and up to 256GB of storage. The screen is slightly less impressive, although it's similar in size and resolution. It's an IPS LCD display rather than AMOLED. The primary camera is also a slight downgrade with a 12-megapixel dual lens, but that said, the front-facing camera is actually a decent step up at 20 megapixels. It also has a larger 4,000 mAh battery, stereo speakers, splash resistance, and lightning-fast infrared face recognition. It's packaged in a slightly cheaper feeling plastic body compared to OnePlus 6's glass and aluminium frame, but it doesn't look bad by any means, and especially if you opt for the Kevlar-backed version instead. And what makes all of this really impressive is the fact that you get all of that for about $300. The price varies depending on where you look. So for over $200 less, you get the same performance and a bigger battery. The trade-off is the build and the slightly lower megapixel camera, but if you don't care about that, it's a no-brainer, right? Well, not quite. In terms of what these devices are like to actually use, there's really very little difference between the two. They both blaze through apps and games and have ample specs for any task you can throw at them. In the camera department, they're also similar. Their cameras are absolutely reflective of their decent mid-range status. They both do surprisingly well for their price, but they fall short of the greatness we see on Galaxies, Pixels, or Apple devices. But then there are a few other considerations that might give you pause for thought. One of these is the software. Both are on Android 8.1 Oreo, but the OnePlus is running Oxygen OS on top, whereas the Pocophone has MIUI. Both are just fine. MIUI is actually pretty uninvasive for the most part and may even have some features that you like, but a lot of people will choose OnePlus for its stock Android-like experience. This is something that a lot of people look for, and it may just be the clincher for some. And that differentiator becomes all the more important when you consider that Xiaomi has recently begun the shady practice of sneaking ads into their software. Users are noticing ads appear on pre-installed apps, as well as in the settings menu and more. Apparently this is to offset the price, and they're very subtle. I haven't seen this happen once yet myself, but the fact that Xiaomi would do this without warning, on a device that you paid for in good faith, is pretty uncool. I can't imagine OnePlus pulling a stunt like that. There's also the slight issue of streaming that you may have heard of. The Pocophone F1 doesn't have Widevine L1, which means that you can't stream HD videos from Netflix, BBC, Amazon, etc., and it will instead be capped at 540p. You can see the difference, but whether that's an issue for you will depend on how much you use those services. So with all that said, which is the better phone? Well, that would have to be the OnePlus 6. This is a nicer device to use with fewer compromises and a fantastic build quality. And no ads. Which is the better value though? That would have to be the Pocophone F1, because I'm honestly not sure that all those extras you get with the OnePlus are worth over $200. Words like flagship, mid-range and budget are thrown around a lot, to the point that they've lost pretty much all their meaning. But rather than putting everything into neat little categories, it's better to think of this as a spectrum, with cheap disposable phones at one end and premium luxury devices at the other. Better yet, think of it like a buffet, where you can pick and choose the specs and features that matter to you, and mix and match to create your own perfect device. There's enough option out there now that this is possible. Often it's not actually the raw specs that create the perfect Android experience. The devil is in the details. Details like video playback or splash resistance. And those details are unique to every user. The OnePlus 6 simply sits a little further along the spectrum and has a few more tasty morsels on its plate. The Pocophone F1 is a little better value, but if you have the budget for the OnePlus 6, then you will be able to feel that extra expense. So I hope you found this video useful and interesting, guys. If you did, then please leave a like, please share it around. Let us know in the comments down below what you think. Which of these devices appeals to you and why? Subscribe for more like this, hit the bell button if you want notifications, and head over to AndroidAuthority.com, for we are your source for all things Android.